Life Audio.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to Billy and the Go. Our show is all about overcoming life's challenges, overcoming adversity. Today, I have the honor and privilege to interview, have a conversation with my cousin, David Wall Rice. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, to be in conversation with you as always. Interesting to be in this platform, but always a blessing to be, close to you, my big cousin.
Amen. I got a special treat I'm going to read your biography here. That's pretty. Okay. David Wall Rice is professor of psychology at Morehouse College and principal investigator of the Identity, Art, and Democracy Lab. The lab is a research space that explores expressions of identity balance through engagement, the exploration of varied contexts and personal narratives. It is a strengths-based lab that works to understand and to elicit behavioral bests. David graduated from Morehouse with a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and earned a doctorate in personality psychology from Howard University, with a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University and postdoctoral study at Teachers College, Columbia University. David frequently applies his research to cultural criticism and to social impact programming. He has worked with companies including the Coca-Cola Company, the NFL, Polo by Ralph Lauren, we'll talk about that, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and has provided commentary for C-SPAN, NPR, CBS News, CNN, MSNBC, and his writing and opinion have appeared in the Washington Post, Vibe Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, and the New York Times Magazine. Among other media outlets, David's writing is also represented in the Cornell Hip Hop Collection as part of the Adler Hip Hop Archive. My cousin, you've been busy.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
Just fun stuff.
Just slightly. Tell me more about the lab. Tell me about what's the lab about?
The lab is a space. It's like, essentially it's a playground, right? So it's a playground for ideas. And it really is very much an extension of fundamental curiosities that I had growing up on how to be. And so, the instruction and the direction of the mentoring I got within the discipline of psychology has always been rooted in looking at positives. And that's something that's not typically done with respect to Black folk in general. And so it's a space where I bring together students who are genius, where we interrogate popular culture and scholarship and look at how those things intersect in terms of how it is that we understand ourselves, we understand context by which we define ourselves and by which other people define us, and, look at innovative ways to explain why Black folk are brilliant. And by that example and capturing, looking at how it is that we understand human beings writ large as being beautiful and brilliant and full of potential and opportunity. So, the lab is something that has been rooted at Morehouse College because I've been at Morehouse for the balance of my career. But it really is an amalgam of, the writing that I did when I was younger in the hip hop space. So stuff that I did for The Source and Vibe and the Washington Post in terms of reviews of hip hop culture, what hip hop meant to me. I'm not a hip hop scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but I am a scholar that's influenced by, the cultural space that I grew up in, and hip hop was significant to me. And so those narratives are ones that I saw as being central and important. And what's interesting is looking at how it is that, especially as we're looking at celebrating 50 years of hip hop culture, how it is that juggernaut really provides in many respects boundaries and outlines for how it is that we understand popular culture. And in understanding that, how it is that we define and understand people through particular lenses. And so what my interest is in looking at expanding the aperture of hip hop culture, of Black culture, of Black folk, and looking at how it is that that might be an inlet to understanding different parts of the diaspora. I know I went behind God's back to explain that.
No, that's all right, man. That's all right. That's all right. It's good for our listeners to understand and hear. Has it been well received? Has the lab been well received?
It has been, sure. Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of the students. Like I said, it's been a playground for me, and not to sound casual in how it is that I engage academics, but it's been a space where we really test and interrogate ideas. I know that I've been at Morehouse, which means that I've been in this lab space for 18 years now. And there have been peaks and valleys in terms of what the lab has looked like. When I first got there, I had a good number of students who were part of the lab. Maybe 10 years in, I had less students, maybe 5 or something like that. Then maybe I had no students as I did administrative work and did, looked at some of the archival things that our students did. And then went back up to a good solid 2 or 3 students. But one of the things that I'm really, really proud of is that last year I was able to publish a book that looked at the work that we've done in the lab and that my students have done. So I have this construct called identity orchestration, looking at how it is that individuals ebb and flow in terms of how it is that they define and look at their identity, how it is that we can, again, look at that within popular cultural spaces. And so it's an edited volume. So I have a lot of pieces in there, but the thing that's so cool about it is that my students are responding to and are talking about identity orchestration, and they're doing it from this first person narrative. And that's something that's important to talk about in terms of what and how the work that we do is anchored. It's anchored in narratives and in talk and text and posture, what's said and what's left unsaid. And so having those first person accounts in this book, it was really special to me. It's really, really special because, my mentor, whose name is Edmund W. Gordon, he actually turns 102 next Tuesday. And so Professor Gordon was a student of, W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a student of Alain Locke. He's a student of Howard Thurman. And those folks are iconic, obviously, in terms of Black intelligentsia. And so he's where he went to Howard University, and, through training that I had at Howard with A. Wade Boykin, who's a phenomenal thinker in the psychological space, I was connected to Professor, and Professor wrote the foreword for the book. And, I have, my son, Biko, wrote the afterword to the book.
Oh, wow.
My dissertation advisor contributed to the book. My wife, who is a scholar in media studies, contributed to the book. My mother, actually, I wrote a piece with her that's in the book. And then, these really, really important students who, they're more than just students. They're thinkers who have inspired me in meaningful ways, and to be able to capture their voices in that text is something that's been remarkable. So that book has been well received, and I'm really, really proud of it because it really defines and captures what the lab has been about, and it portends, kind of the future of what the lab can be about, and and how it is that I think about and reimagine what comes next.
Congratulations, David.
Thank you.
So proud of you, brother.
Thank you.
So this is a great segue into faith. It's remarkable, like where you are now. You're very humble, but where you are now, professionally, academically, as a father, as a son, a person, as a Christian. I'm wondering, how did you get to where you are from here? Okay.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy. Yeah, that's a lot. You're putting a lot on it.
So that's one of my favorite photos, man. It's on my desk. Let me tell you something. If I don't love you, you do not make. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, no, seriously though. We were close because we're both single, right?
Yeah. Only kids.
Only children. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a brotherly love type thing growing up. But seriously, all the way, how do you get from where you were to where you are? And how has your faith helped you, help guide you?
Well, faith, as many people will say, who have, acknowledged the successes in their lives. And I don't, I think that, reading someone's bio is important and, give some perspective, but that certainly isn't a check mark of who that individual is. You know what I'm saying? And so when I talk about successes, I'm not talking about my CV, but I mean, the successes, as you well know, Billy, the successes in my life are my boys and, my relationship with my beloved Mickey. And so, the through line of those successes have been faith and hopefully good works, right? And that's something that's been taught to me through family. So, you see that picture, that picture says so much. And of course I don't know who took that photo. So it's a wonderful photograph. I think it might be mildly, neglectful of me, but I mean, whatever. But the thing is that is my big cousin. That is my family. The through line that I have that allows me to be as healthy as I am. So we'll err on the side of me being healthy. That's not to suggest that I don't have, things that I have to deal with and wrestle with, obviously, right? And that there haven't been unhealthy space in negotiating to get to, the space that I'm at now. And there might be, again, I talk about things in terms of peaks and valleys, but the thing that has sustained me has been faith and family. And, one of the things is that, as you well know, I grew up away from, a lot of my family and in DC. And, I was with my mom and I was being raised either in Los Angeles or in Texas. And that was difficult. It was difficult, but there was a foundation that was there, in terms of, what my family expectations were of me. And those were closely interwoven into purpose that was based in a faith in God and in doing good works. And so, my going to school and kind of the things that are on the CV, those are all those are all, some folks might look at them as accolades and as achievements, but really they're just illustrations of tools that should allow for us to do freedom work. Because that's the responsibility that I have in coming from the family that you and I come from. We have folks in our family who are highly educated. And so that education was not placed at center so folks could just really feel good about themselves and pat themselves on their backs.
Right.
That education was so that we could be of service to the community that we find ourselves in. And that is rooted in a faith and trust in God and what it is that God would have his people do for those who are, in the most marginal spaces. And then when you are not in those marginal spaces, understanding the responsibilities that you have to give voice to those who don't have the bully pulpit that you might have. So, faith and family, and it sounds cliche, you know what I mean? So I appreciate you having this space to kind of unpack these things. Because, you can say faith and family sustain me. Well, how? Does that mean that stuff was really, really easy? No, it means, it means that through those things that were not easy, you were able to lean into people that knew who you were about and what it is that you needed to live up to. One story that I tell a lot, when I'm teaching, and I've told to my boys, and you've known this before, you were always kind of that gold standard for being a young Black male, right? And so when I came to DC to be around you, and I remember one particular time you were taking me to the movies, and I was just cursing and doing all this kind of stuff, really just posturing, trying to be cool.
Right.
And I remember you said to me, and it was nobody else was around. So it was like, I remember you said to me, and you weren't trying to embarrass me or anything like that. And you could have, I mean, cause you did embarrass me a lot. But, one of the things that you said to me, seriously, you just said simply, you're like, you don't have to do that with me. And I get chills thinking about that right now, because it showed a type of maturity that you had, and a type of loving kindness that you had as well. And you didn't play me out. You weren't like, dude, you're a sucker. And what are you talking about? Why are you cursing? Why? You didn't even do all that. You were like, you don't have to do that with me. And my thing was, if I didn't do that, if I didn't have to do that with you, the posturing, then I didn't have to do that with anybody else. You know what I mean? And I think that that's the type of example that I had from my family. Look, man, when I was in high school, I made horrible grades. I mean, horrible grades. I looked at my transcript
Mhm.
like maybe a year and a half ago, and, F's, I had to repeat courses. I was disciplined heavily in school, but it was, I've written this before. It was almost my parents' fault, because, you know, as long as I was okay in my parents' eyes, what anybody else said didn't matter. And
Right. Right.
it wasn't like my folks were like, look, just, you don't have to achieve in school. It was, it was like, look, you got to lock in. Obviously you're smart. Anybody who talks to you knows that you have the tools to do well in school. You're going to have to do well in school eventually. So if you're not going to do it now, there's going to be a price to pay. You know what I mean? And you're going to be able to pay the price. So my family never hung me out there, but they always knew the context that I was operating in. So in Texas, it was like super racist, where I got in fights all the time. People were calling me nigga. And I mean,
Right.
I was fighting all of the time, like all of the time,
Mhm.
and I'd love to say I was fighting and I was handling everybody. Now I had my good share of wins, but I took
Right.
L's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Me too.
my family, my mom and my dad, and even though my folks were divorced and all that kind of stuff, my dad was always there. One of the things that I said is that, my father wasn't there the way that I wanted him to be. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But he was always there the way that I needed for him to be. And I didn't realize that until I got older. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because he was never absent. And he and my mother always had this really, really great friendship, and they always had each other's backs. There was never me talking on the phone to my dad, ratting my mom out about something, and then, playing
Oh.
one side against the other. They were like, what are you, crazy? You know
I
what I
love
mean?
that. Yeah. I
They
only did it one time. Once.
yeah. They were like, there's no sense of that. So, the thing for me is I had that support from you. So, that example that I gave there,
Mhm.
that really was what I got from other family members as well. So even though I might not have done well academically in school, there was always an awareness that I had the capacity. And so when ways were made for me to go to Morehouse, I made sure that
Proceed.
I didn't take for granted, or try not to be profane in how I explain it now.
Mhm.
I did not take advantage of that opportunity, you know. But even then, I really, coasted on my ability to I can write. So I know I can write. So I did that and all that kind of stuff. But I really didn't get serious about academics until I knew I wanted to go to Columbia for journalism school. And then I locked in my year and a half of school, like, was on the honor roll, got 4.0 GPA and all that kind of stuff. And it's
Mhm.
crazy because my GPA was still like a 2.9. So it was like, man, you were
So,
super average until, you had to prove something. And then when you're in graduate school, you just kind of do well. And the thing is, for psychology, I was interested, and I was always thoughtful about it. And, my thing was, how is it that I can use my writing, my thinking, my degree,
mhm.
to position, voices for people who are very much like me, but who might not have the resources. So how do you stand in the gap for that part of your community? And I'm always intentional about using language because I never want for different parts of our community to feel other. I don't believe in this kind of exclusive exceptionalism because I went to Morehouse or because I have an Ivy League degree or because that I'm not like them. We are all interconnected. You know what I'm saying? And so my thing is, how is it that I am God's tool in terms of being a resource for those folks who are who are me? You know what I mean?
Well, let me tell you this. You are not
That
alone
makes sense.
academically. It may mean all the sense in the world, but I want to share this with you. Okay. Academically, like when I got college, I actually was junior college and went to Naval Academy preparatory school before I went to Naval Academy. I had a 1.4 the first semester, and then halfway, it was trimesters. The first trimester, I had a 1.4. Halfway through the second trimester, I had a 1.4. And I went to an academic board, and they said, you're out. So you can either, when you get kicked out, you said you got one or two choices. Either you stay and prove yourself by the end of the trimester, or you go home. And guess who I was not going home to?
Yeah, I know that's right.
Aunt Jean. No.
Yeah.
So I figured it out. So let me ask you this.
Sure.
Who was there a go-to growing up? When you kid, teenager, young adult, and you got into some stuff. I know you had your faith, and I don't know how early your faith journey
Early.
began.
I was always
but
early.
right.
I was in church since I'm a little guy. Grace United
There we
Methodist
go.
Church. When
Mhm.
when I moved from Los Angeles to Texas, our family was the founder of Grace United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I was in the choir. I was, I think I was the president of like the youth group, if not the vice president or something like that. But
Mhm.
that's where, I was close and where I came up with other kids who were like-minded, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I was, I was a church kid for some time. And of course, both of our mothers are, you know,
Right.
ministers, as Gene would say, close to the cross. So that's
But when you
always been there.
but when you got in your head about stuff, problem, who'd you go to? Mom? Cousin Brenda?
Yeah, man. It sounds corny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was my mom.
Yeah. My mom
I
too.
could always count on her. You know what I mean? So, and the thing was, I wasn't, I wasn't fearful of any kind of judgment because, you know, the fundamental is that I was well loved and that I did not need to be ashamed of myself, my person. You know what I mean?
Mm.
The behavior might have been questioned, but
Not the end.
my person was never so I always had a relationship with my mom where I could talk to her about stuff, no matter, and it was nothing that was too that, and so that's, I mean, this might be, what kind of square I was too. There was nothing that was so gigantic that I couldn't talk to her about it. You know what I mean? There were some things I didn't need to talk to her about. So, I mean, it's not like I talked to her about everything, but if there was something going down, and she said this, my father said it too. You got to talk to us. And this is the kind of stuff that I tell my boys now. I have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I communicate this highly with them both. You always want to make sure I know what's going on. Between me and mommy, you got to make sure that we know, because we got you no matter what.
Right. That's it.
So, I mean, I'll walk through hellfire for you, and so, those are kind of things that were communicated to me by my parents. So I'm very, very blessed and for that. And then I had, I was very, very close, my grandmother, Ella Rice, on my father's side, very, very close to her and my grandfather. And I was interestingly close to Evelyn Wall. And so my grandma is actually going to turn 100 at the end. Well, I mean, she's passed, but we'll
Yeah.
celebrate her 100th birthday.
All
And
right.
so, I was able to talk to her, because again, man, the family is never, they're never going to sell you out. I mean, my family was never, they could fuss at me. They could say all that kind of stuff. I mean, and I think about lessons that I've learned from, Uncle Randall and, and I mean, everybody. I can think, Anike, was at Spelman when I was at Morehouse, and Jabari actually was at. It was very, very interesting because Jabari was actually at Howard when I was in graduate school, so I would see him in the library and stuff like that. And there was always this kind of this interconnectedness of accountability. You know what I mean? And so, with Anike, the thing I hated is that Anike is a little older and I wanted her to be there. She has some bad friends, boy, I tell you what. Anyway, and I really wanted her, but she like looked out, you know what I mean? She was like, my baby cousin, come over here. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Do I need to put $5 in your pocket? All that kind of stuff. And then it was like, you're not going to be like that. Why are you hanging out with it? There was always that kind of check. And so, if I couldn't go to my mom about something, that through line of familial accountability was able to be found somewhere else. So, I wasn't, when I come to the summers and stay with Jeannie and whatever summer programs she had, me associated with and stuff like that, there was going to be no nonsense. And she loved me hard, but she loved me. When I was with Randall at Trans Africa, he loved me hard, but he loved me. And it was all about accountability, with Max. It was the same type of thing with Jewel, you know what I mean? And those were the folks who were with Randy, you know what I mean? And with Scotty. And so again, it was all of this. Yeah, well, you're going to do that. I mean, these were all folks who were, for me, they were my family, but they were also tremendous role models. And there were people that I could look to in certain effects to look up to.
Right.
So, I mean, I remember Randy being at your graduation from Landon, and, him saying, that's what you want to be like. You want to graduate like your country. I mean, I remember him having that conversation with me.
I could hear him saying that. I could hear him because he would always talk. He was a coach or something.
Yeah, and he's scared, and he scared the hell out of her. She was like, "You want to be like that? I hear you doing this in school right now. You need to be like." And I was like, "God, dog, okay, okay."
I'm good.
I mean, because I don't want to answer. Whatever knuckleheads might have been giving me a hard time, in school or whatever, administrators or anything like that. Whatever, I could bear that. I could not bear disappointing or not living up to not the image, because I want to be very, very clear, not the image of folks in our family, but accountability and expectations that our family had. You didn't want to let folks down on that. Because I could be a carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter. You know what I'm saying? But it was like, how are you going to make sure that you're building for people who are, less fortunate than you? You know what I mean? So for me, it was, as long as I could, I could always go to my mom, and I always knew that through line of family was there to help me be accountable in my, in my, I don't want to say I'm melodramatic. I was going to say in my darkest times, but in those times where I wasn't, feeling fully who I was, I could lean into family, and it might have taken something, I might have felt like I need to do this myself and all this kind of jazz, but invariably, family and faith are the folks that held me up.
That's it. Segue. You mentioned have you heard this before? We tend to be attracted to women like our mom. Would you agree? Because what I want to talk about.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, my mom
and faith wise too. I mean, you too, for you. Yes.
Yeah. I was going to say, my mom would say, of course, Vicky is beautiful and she's so sweet and all that kind of. So my mom would say, you better.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the thing is that, the thing that I knew about my mom and was that she was good and she was right. You know what I mean? She was a good and right person. And I think that, the examples of my mother and my grandma certainly who it is that, I'd spend the rest of my life with. So, Mickey, in terms of, uh, Mickey might be demonstratively the kindest person I've ever met. Right. And I used to think that I'd always kind of held my grandmother in that regard. God, but I saw her go off once. I was like, yo, it's like,
Well,
but that's not to say, anything disparaging about my
yeah.
grandmother, anything like that. But, just, she's a beautiful, and I'm very blessed that, quite honestly, she puts up with me,
I don't know
and that we're able to negotiate a life together. But that stuff's not easy. You know what I mean? Because we are both very independent. We both have ideas of how it is that we need to do right in the world, and that demands time and focus that is not always in one another's space. And so, kind of negotiating that and giving one another, that's challenging. I mean, Mick and we just celebrated.
This is just great. Yeah, keep looking. You better not get the number wrong.
So 19, we just celebrated 19 years of being married, and we were together 10 years ahead of that. So, Mickey and I have been together for 29 years. So 29 years does not come without work and effort. And Mickey is the type of beautiful that is committed to that work with me.
Congratulations.
And I hope I demonstrate, as I mature and grow even more, that I am committed to the work that she is attached herself to as well.
Well, a big part of that success, I'm sure you agree that you have to be equally yoked. Right? And you are. Clearly she's in charge, which I like to tease about that, man.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't deny it. I mean, Mickey, the thing about Mick, I can imagine what I would be like if Mickey were not in my life, and that would a much smaller and I don't mean that in terms of yeah, I don't mean that in terms, I don't know, insignificant or petty. I don't mean it in that way. But I mean, the thing that Mickey affords me an opportunity to take chances outside of my comfort, and so that's what she affords me. She kind of pushes me, and so having that person who demonstrates that confidence in you and kind of pushing you forward and and holding you up, that's a big deal. And I think that those things aren't often articulated and said, you know what I mean? But in thinking about her, she's a great she's a great wife, but she's just a fantastic and beautiful and unparalleled person. Having somebody like that you get the call when you feel like, this stuff doesn't seem to be clicking the way it is. No matter what, whether it's at work or whether, it's on, a workout that your cousin has you do where you're like, God, dog, I thought I was strong.
Nah, it's only 9 minutes.
Yeah, you tell me about it. Or the stuff with the kids, a lot of times, it's interesting. And the boys, I want to make sure that they're able to withstand and to influence this world that we're in. And I know that I hope and pray they will. But I think they will be because family and faith. They have that through line as well. And Mickey's family is phenomenal. One of the things that I wanted, because I grew up away from family, is I wanted to be attached to family in a meaningful way. And, having two boys is amazing because I get to see what it would be like if you and I lived in the same house? What would it be like if I had a brother? You know what I mean? And, seeing them grow up is amazing. And then seeing how it is that they are connected to community. So how they're community, how they're connected to their godparents. We're very, very fortunate where we live in this kind of this old school neighborhood where literally up the street is Biko's God family. And I mean, I'm pointing like up the street, like
Literally.
5 houses down.
Yeah.
And, there are 3 guys who were in my freshman dorm with me, whose kids I know. And, so there's that, but then, he's able to go to his godfather's house in DC and spend time. And then his uncle who's in Maryland, and then he can, go to see his aunt Thomas, and then he can visit his aunt. I'm talking about Biko because he's older. Then he can go to Lockton. He has all kinds of resources. And one of the things that's really, really awesome to me, he's a good kid, but Randall and Hazel and his impression on them. You know what I mean? Like I remember Randall was, for me, Randall of course I call him Uncle Randall. Randall is my first cousin once removed, right? So Randall and my mom are first cousins, the same way that my mom's related to Aunt Jeannie. And I just call him Uncle. I'm not going to go into all that, but
Right.
Randall was a bar. You know what I'm saying? So he was a moral, a mentor bar. Anyway, I remember when we all went to go and spend time with family in St. Kitts with him at his invitation. Biko was a little guy, man. He must have been like 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. And after, maybe Randall and Hazel called on the telephone. You hear Randall and his boy voice, David, how are you? It's like, oh, snap. Like, oh, Randall calling. What's going on? Hey, what's going on? What, and he researches. Is something you want? He's like, yeah, where's Biko? You don't want to talk to me? He didn't want to talk to me at all. So I was like, he's right here. Hold on. I was like, he's 8. What are you talking about? And so I gave the phone to Biko, and I'm sitting there like staring at his face, like, what's going on? And so he got off the phone, and I think, and Hazel must have been on the phone too. And they were telling Biko how proud they were of him because he had written kind of a thank you letter for having gone to visit them, and was just explaining what he was doing in school and all that. And so they were saying how proud they were and what a good guy he was and all that. And so having that connection was good. But he was like, the reason that happened was because Mickey was like my mother. So going back to, kind of how people are connected, like, you better write a thank you letter. Them people did all this stuff for you. You better, write that letter and put it in the mail. So, again, looking at what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to treat people, even people that, are your family and loved ones. How do you treat them with respect? How do you ensure that faith is a through line and all those kinds of things? Those things are all, bound up in how it is that I hope my kids are coming up, and how it is that, I married well. One of the things that Mickey's dad said, and he ain't never lied, when he gave a toast after we got married, he said, David, I love you, you're great, and all that kind of stuff, but brother, you want to know a lot. He was right.
That's right. Now you got 2 sons.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Biko, yeah. So there's Biko and Stokely. So Stokely is the younger one, and Biko's the old guy. And Stokely is quite the person. He is an amazing. One of the things that was interesting around COVID was, that was a difficult time, obviously, for everyone. He allowed us to get through COVID, the entire family, because I remember every morning we got up, you get up and you say, Stokely, how are you doing? He's like, great. This is the best day ever. That's how he woke up every morning for 2 years, nonstop. And he meant it. It wasn't shit. He wasn't pretending. Right. But beyond that, he's just a great mind. He's really creative thing. and, I think about I think about Beakley. I've written about them before, and, Biko, more subversively resistant. And so you could say something to Biko, he'd be like, all right. And he'd go and just write his protest, turn his protest in and just walk out. Right. And then and somebody, they'd be like, dog, I thought he was part of the program. And it was like, and Stokely is more is more in your face. So if they say, this is what's going on, Stokely would be like, that's not what's going on. I don't believe in that. Explain that to me. And it's very, very interesting how at a young age, I'm sure because of the vocabulary that Biko had, Stokely is one who's authority. Biko has always been one who is about doing the right. And Biko doesn't do a lot of explaining around how it is that something is wrong. He just says, this isn't right. And will explain why it is that, he's pushing against this wrong. What Stokely will do is he'll say, this is the wrong thing. Why would you even do this? This is crazy. Don't you understand A, B, and C? Mm-hmm. So looking at them as brothers is really, really interesting in terms of, have the capacity to have impact and how it is that I've seen Biko have impact and how it is that it's interesting looking at growing up, the thing that I say with respect to him and in understanding how it is that Black boys in particular are embraced or who are maligned, the educational system of the United States of America is, making sure that he is not broken, right? Making sure that his spirit is not broken. And that's a test because, you got to make sure he's respectful. You know what I'm saying? You got to make sure you can't go acting crazy. Yeah.
Sure.
And so, how is it that you do that and, afford latitude, but also make sure that you have the context that are around him in check so that you can't say that to him. I'll take care of that stuff, but he's asking the right question. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or, we certainly can they're great souls that I'm fortunate to be some influence in shepherding through their young year.
Well, clearly both of them, it's a nice cross section of the mama and the daddy. Because as you're describing both of them, Mickey.
All the good stuff I really attribute to her. The patience, the kindness, they're both so we're blessed. We're very, very blessed.
God bless you. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah,
you and Stokely are pretty busy. Excuse me. You and Mickey are pretty busy. Travel quite a bit.
Yeah.
Is it hard to maintain? Is it challenging to maintain that career balance?
Yeah.
Balance. And you're doing it. You still, it ain't easy.
No. I mean, it is the.
How do
you faith in it? You have to look at it. It takes some introspection. So, the thing is your balance is how it is that you understand yourself fitting in and how other people fit in around. There's a lot of travel there's a lot of stuff we do with the boys that, that wasn't done with me. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Taking them to AAU games, going to swim practice,
Mm-hmm.
That I had to go to for Stoke. And when I say have to go to, right now during the summer, it's a little bit easy. And but it, and I don't want it to sound like a burden, but it still is work. You know what I mean? So I have to go to those things because I have to show up for them.
Yeah.
And I have to travel to get some of the work that I need to do done. And that's demanding on the kids. I have to make sure that they understand that, but that the work that I'm doing requires for me to go and be away. And that's the same for Mick as well. It can be more difficult for her, not to mansplain anything, but it can be more difficult because there are all these social expectations for what it is that women are supposed to do, quote unquote.
Right.
And I think that even, you know, in my spaces and pockets, I probably fell into those tropes or slipped into those tropes, not consciously, but just kind of thinking about, well, I got to go do this. And why isn't, and you got to be like, talk about being equally yoked and what responsibilities are equally shared. And then how it is that some things aren't going to be equal. I went to South Africa a couple of weeks ago, right? And I had the chance to sit down with this white who was just a gift. It was a gift to be able to sit with him, who had worked with Madiba, who had worked with Nelson Mandela for some time. And he talked about the of memory work and of dialogue work, memory and dialogue work. So those are takeaways that I thought were but one of the things that he said, and I wrote a book. I forgot to write it. Balance Advancing Identity Theory by looking at young. And one of the things that he said, not in direction to this book, but in general, he had said, I don't believe in balance. He said, I don't believe that there's kind of this equal, give and take. He said, I believe in rhythm. I was like, yo. And he was like, I believe in, you got to figure out where some people have some beats and some people have others. I was like, oh man, I love that.
Wow.
I love that. Where there's not necessarily equal contributions to family.
That's right.
Meaning that, Mickey has strengths that I will never have, and so how is it that she will visit those strengths on what our family looks like, and how does it lift me up in meaningful ways? Like I said, if Mickey weren't in my life, I think I would be smaller. But with her presence, I think I have the courage to be larger than I might have been in a regular space. She gives that to the boys also. You know what I mean? Yeah. She gives that to the boys also. And so, in her doing that, how is she able to, what are the things that I'm responsible for giving and pushing forward and making center for the family, for her as well? I feel like I'm rambling here. I hope I'm making sense.
No, you're not rambling. You're making all kinds of sense, brother. A lot of wisdom.
I really hope I'm making sense. Never talk about, Mickey in public.
Just, like I said, it's taking a life of its own. Thank you for sharing that about your family.
Of course.
Yeah. Going outside the family, you've had a number of, as I read earlier, Coca-Cola Company, NFL, Ralph Lauren, which was you want to talk about that? That's fascinating, man. Great opportunity for Morehouse, for you.
Yeah, the Red thing came about through more. There is I'm trying to see. This is the book I have. Let's see. There is the Ralph Lauren campaign is a campaign because there is a guy named James Jeter who graduated from Morehouse College. This is like the book, like a book of the campaign. James Jeter is a guy who graduated from Morehouse College. Teach him, and this convening at Morehouse called Crown Forum, and Crown Forum is essentially an evolution of chapel after college. And so James Jeter had called me and he said, during COVID, one of the things that we did is instead of meeting in person, what I did is I got on video conversations with friends of mine, and and we had conversations that we would in front of these young scholars at Morehouse to James Jeter, worked at and he had said, look, we have this line that's getting ready to come out that's, based on the of historically Black colleges and universities around the 50s, 60s era. in looking at that kind of collegiate style. And essentially what happened is, we've come and realized 3 years since George Floyd was murdered. And during that summer of reckoning, when he was murdered, of course, we had all of these corporations and white folks in positions of authority, these kind of epiphanies. Oh, well, racism exists in the world.
Mhm.
And so happened at Ralph Lauren. And there's a great article in the Washington Post that came out around the time that the campaign started. But essentially, James was getting ready to leave Ralph Lauren because he was like, I don't see myself. I've worked at Ralph Lauren. He's a kid who
Wow.
grew up in DC. I want to say he went to school without walls. I hope I'm not erroneously attributing an institution to him, but he grew up in DC, and worked in the Polo store in Georgia, and went to Morehouse, and interned at Polo and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things he said, he was like, I've been at Polo for all these many years, and I've never seen Black folks centered the way they should be. And so he actually told this, talk about position of speaking truth to power. He told this to Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren's like, okay, well, what kind of ideas do you have? And he's like, oh, I got some ideas. And so he developed, and I mean, I remember he called me some fall month. I don't remember what it was, right before it came out. And he was like, can I just talk to you for like 5 minutes? And I was like, I really don't have the time. I mean, it's after hours, but I can give you 5 minutes, my guy. And a Zoom call. And then he showed me all of these images. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is incredible. So he showed me this, he showed me that, he showed me this and that. I was like, my guy, whatever I can do to be supportive, let me know. And he said, basically, I need you to just kind of interrogate this, because I want I think this is really important, is what he said, but I want to make sure that I'm not blindly going into it. I want an objective voice to kind of,
Right.
counterbalance it. And I said, yeah. I said, well, if I do that, I said, I'm going to ask some ideas around, white supremacy and privilege, and what does it look like around respectability and being in suits and all this kind of stuff. He's like, that's exactly what I need.
There you go.
And so he said, can you help
Yeah.
me produce this kind of a 2-minute clip? And I said, yeah. I said, sure. I helped him. I got some folks together for them to film. I did the interviews. And so there was a mini documentary that blossomed from 3 minutes into a 30-minute like mini doc that they had, which is just really, really great. I mean, I love that. So I got to, check the box for a producer for that. And then they had this yearbook compendium for the line that came out. So I was a contributing editor, and then there was the campaign, and I was able to participate. I was happy. I was reluctant, because I was like, I don't really, I am an academic. I really am not, trying to really do that. But then there's a part of me that's like, oh man, this would be great fun. And so, they had me in the campaign. It was just kind of, it was dope. It was neat, but it was neat because it was fun. And kind of is an extension of the work that I do with respect to the lab, right? It kind of is a playground for being able to do and to look at innovative ideas, and to look at how it is that something as seemingly significant as a line, and is being represented a line, can make it different. You know what I mean? And so, I'm really proud to be connected to it, because I'm so proud of James Jeter and the work that he did. I mean, it's awesome that this young man, it is that his interest in his discipline and his focus, he was able to make a social impact, and is able to make a voice. And so that's something that, lives forever on Ralph Lauren's site. The stuff is there now, and it was the first misstep of campaigns that they're going to do. So I know they're going to do it, if not with Spelman and Morehouse again, they'll do it with other HBCUs.
I'm glad you were an integral part of this whole process, man. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. James, to James goes all of, the credit, because he really put people that were not about ego, And so that was kind of cool. They weren't about the ego because it's dope. I mean, it's cool. People have posters and all this kind of stuff that are up. And so people could get consumed by that. It was about, how is it that you could amplify the successes and the import of historically Black colleges and universities through this lens of Morehouse and Spelman. So, he's such a good, humble guy. And it was just so cool to see how he was celebrated and how he was lifted up. And, on the night that we did this thing in New York, and it was just a blessing to be able to meet his mom and his sister, and to see how it is that he was really anchored. So he served for me as a role model. I mean, even though he's a younger cat, looking at the work that he does and how he moves in the world, it's really dope. And to be a homeboy for him to be from DC was really kind of cool to be able to look at also.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap up in a minute, but I want a couple things I want you to.
I see you over there writing notes and stuff. I know you.
One is your experience. Has your experience with the NFL been impactful? And two, what nuggets would you share with our audience to help them navigate?
So NFL work has started at Morehouse. We had to do some trainings with athletes, and so that was consequent of Kaepernick having taken a knee. They had folks come to the college, and I was fortunate to be in the room to talk about how we should do could do some trainings through the college. So we've been able to do that, and that's been impactful and cool and really interesting to look at how it is that athletes do use their platforms. I think that so often, folks kind of skate over it and say they make so much money in this, that, and the third. But if you look at how athletes do use their platform, good works, I've been able to see athletes doing really rewarding and instructional for me in my work and how it is that I want to make sure that you to impact, hopefully. So it's been good. The nuggets that I would encourage folks to take away here, if anybody's listening to you, Billy, I think that you know what I mean? One of the things that you've always been is a really person. You've been a reflection of the best parts of the people who I think come into your life in your coaching, in your Billy bodying. I think that essentially what we're talking in Navo, of course, I think what we're really talking about is what your ministry is. And so your ministry is one that where they're at, and a critical base of where they're at in terms of their physicality and how they feel comfortable. And what it is that their body can do for them in a moment that allows for them to open up and be reified in different other ways. So the thing I would encourage to do is to trust a process, right? That centers your best self and that considers the beautiful person that you are. I think that anything less than that needs to be really held up. I mean, I think that so often, the expectation and what society suggests to us is that we need to look at where it is that there are wrongs in our space and in what we're doing. But I'm really, really interested and think it's much more important to look at what's going right and how is it that even in wrong spaces, you can be made stronger and more whole through the lesson.
Absolutely.
One of the things that was said to me a long time ago, this is from a business person. They were like, look, such a high percent of businesses fail, just straight up and down. You don't look at, and this is what they were telling me as I was talking about assets. They were like, oh, okay, I understand, because I'm a business person. So, most businesses fail, right? But I don't study the failed businesses. I need to know about it.
Right.
But I don't study the failed businesses. I study the success models and figure out how it is that we can innovate around successes. And so I think that, one of the things that I hope people away from you, from your ministry, from your messaging, and perhaps what folks can lean into in their lives are, what are the blessings that they have? What are the strengths that they have? And what is the genius and the brilliance that they have? What's the list that they have? And how do they amplify that and how do they scale it in such a way to where they're not only happy themselves, but they can serve as beacon for other people.
Oh, brother. Man, I'm so proud of you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Proud of you.
you're so humble. But I appreciate you taking the time today, talk about all you've done, all that you're doing, your family. Fantastic, cousin.
Thank you. I love you. I wouldn't have spent this
Love
much
you,
time
brother.
talking this deep without you.
Allow me to take a moment to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on the podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you will find dozens other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and much, much more.